The Capital Confidential podcast is brought to you by the Times-Union, the leading newspaper in New York's capital region. Subscribe today or visit online at timesunion.com.
It was a mix between Garth and Garrett, and they had to compromise somewhere. So, take it, lose a T, add an H.
You want to deport an undocumented person? Start with me, because I'm an undocumented person.
How do we beat him in an election?
We will. I'm going to run against him.
I wish you would. I wish you would, Dad. I would.
There are things in here that are unobjectionable because they're not that effective. So yeah, sure, I'll vote for a distinctive license plate. Sure, why not?
Jim, you had your press conference at 4 o'clock.
You're having a press conference now?
That's
You're
right.
talking?
I'm having a press conference.
Well,
now.
is this your space here or is it public?
No, it's my space.
Oh, this is your
Don't
space.
interrupt.
Okay.
I'm David Lombardo, and this is the Capital Confidential podcast. On this episode, I spoke with Gareth Rhodes, a veteran of the Cuomo administration who came up a little short in the Democratic primary in June for the 19th Congressional District. He joined me in the Capitol to speak about the decision to mount his first political campaign, the backstory of his famous RV, and the effect of the New York Times endorsement late in the race. He was reflective and insightful during our conversation. One programming note, though. I had some audio difficulties during our interview, so the sound is a little uneven at points. I did my best to clean it up, but you might hear some issues. And with that, enjoy the show. At what point do you decide you're running for Congress, and what was that decision-making process like?
Absolutely. I think for many of us, after Trump won, it was the whole world kind of changed in some ways, at least on the political side. And I had actually spent election night I was in Ohio, in Columbus, helping. I was trying to get out the vote for Hillary, and Trump had won Ohio. And a number of us who have been involved in politics for a while were sitting and thinking, this is, for our generation, really, this is going to be the next challenge. Is how do we keep our democracy alive, and how do we stand up to the many things we know this president has promised to do? So I was looking at ways to get back involved again. I'd grown up in this congressional district. When FASO took office, I was watching very closely to see, is this someone who's going to be independent or someone who is going to be aligned closely with this administration. The healthcare vote was the final straw for me. And to me, you can be a Democrat, you can be a Republican, you can have political differences, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is that you're not doing any harm to your constituents, and that healthcare vote would have taken healthcare away from 65,000 people in New York 19. And I was back home after that happened. I've seen the amount of activism going on in the district, and this has been a seat that's been very tough for Democrats to win. There's more registered Democrats here than Republicans, yet we've lost this seat by 9 points. We lost this seat by 30 points, and I believe that my candidacy would give us both a shot to win this seat, which is important, make sure that FASO is not continuing to take these votes, but also be able to help restore many people's desire to see someone in office who would be more responsive to their needs. FASO.
But how did you make the connection where it would be Gareth Rhodes was the answer? I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but my understanding is you'd always been the guy behind the guy.
Yes.
Why this time were you ready to be the guy?
Going back to my days as a volunteer firefighter, from what I wanted to do after college, I won a Truman Scholarship for public service, and I started at a low level here in the governor's office. So public service was very important to me. And I spent that spring of 2017 speaking with local county leaders and local Democratic Party leaders, and I was encouraged by many people in the community to really take a good look at this race. People believed having someone who has deep roots in the district, someone who could inspire Democratic turnout, but also at the same time reach out to the Republicans and the independents and the non-Democrats in the district would be important. Someone who also grasped how this is a unique area. I told the story of having a neighbor who has a NRA sticker on his truck and a Sierra Club sticker on his truck, and it's the neighbor who has a Trump sign in his yard and a ban fracking sign in his yard. That is New York 19, and it's why I believe this district is more difficult politically than it might look from just the registration numbers. Why having someone who kind of grew up in that type of environment might do very well here.
And how do you get the ball rolling on this? You said you talked to some county chairs, but how do you actually make that leap? Is it you find the right team? Do you just file and just pray things come together? What do you do?
So you Google how do you run for Congress, right? You kind of look at what are the filing, the legality of it all.
Okay.
Because you're basically setting up an organization. And I called a number of other candidates who had run for office before, for state senate, for Congress, for other races, and they kind of walked me through what the process was. But it really was creating that core team of people. It was both people who I had gone to school with, people I had worked with before, people just friends who I had known, and we hired a treasurer. Treasurer is like your first person you kind of bring on board, and we opened a campaign account, and I wrote a press release myself and got an email list of reporters and blasted it out, and that's kind of how we started.
And so at that point, does it feel like it's a real campaign or what?
So when I first launched, I kind of said, I'm considering, right? People are going to do this.
The exploratory
testing
committee.
Waters, right? And the exploratory committee really legally is not, it's not. It's once you spend or raise more than I think $5,000, you're technically you're basically considered to be a candidate, which is not a lot of money in a congressional race. So
No.
I actually announced, I think it was in May of 2017, that I was considering running for office, and I that's always the way. I never actually, I think, put out a statement saying I'm officially running.
Oh, so you never ran?
Exactly.
It's just
right?
you didn't lose. You never ran.
Exactly. That's the way I should be spinning it. But it very quickly, we saw so much enthusiasm, we saw so much energy, and it was very encouraging right off the bat. So to me, if there was a considering stage, it ended pretty quickly, and I was committed to running.
What was the learning curve like? What were some of the first initial surprises as a candidate for the first time?
Having worked in state politics, state government, you see a certain side of this, but I had never really been on the campaign side of things. So fundraising was new to me. Think about you hear all the time, fundraising's an important part of this. You basically sit down. I went through my Gmail and I called every human. I went through my phone and called every person I knew. I called the people who I thought might be wealthy and said, can you give me the most money? And they would give you $50 and say, good luck out there. We're all behind you, and that's part of the process. We actually did very well on grassroots fundraising, which I was very proud of. But there was a lot of things that I hadn't experienced before, even though I had been in politics. But there was certainly a learning curve to that.
Did you find that any of your past experiences translated into this new world or not?
So I traveled. I think I traveled to every county and state across the state when I worked for the governor. I was up at Dannemora after the prison escape. I spent about a week in Buffalo during that crazy snowstorm. I traveled to Cuba. So I'd seen a lot of the operational side of how these, you set up events and how you kind of, an elected official has a public persona and how you translate that. To me, it was important to develop a narrative in a crowded primary. And that's something I think I had learned from working in the governor's office was people's attention spans are very short. And it was a crowded field of people who many believed in the same issues. Many were Democrats. People liked a lot of us. There wasn't so much. It was hard. Sometimes people would separate us. So to me, the way I defined my candidacy was I wanted to be the candidate that went everywhere. And this is district. People are shocked to hear this. It's larger than Connecticut and Rhode Island together. It's larger than both those states combined. So I bought an RV, and this really became, I sat down once on a Google spreadsheet, found out there was 163 towns, and I said, let's just go to every town.
So RV, how did you choose to go in an RV? Talk to me about RV shopping. Are we talking a secondhand RV salesman got the great deal for you? What was that like?
So there was a debate among myself and some of my team about how to go to every town. Some people said, Gareth, you should just buy a pickup. My first car had been a pickup, a Chevy S10. They said, just get this Chevy S10 like your first vehicle. And I said, if we want to spend real time in these communities, we're going to have to spend the night. I mean, if you're out in Otsego, 25 towns in Otsego County, if you're out there, I don't want to be coming back to Cohasset every night. I want to be spending time out there. So you can do a breakfast, you can do a dinner, you can do the whole thing the next day. And so he said, well, we can just get an RV, and that would enable this. finding an RV was very hard. Now, there's a lot of, they're very expensive. To rent an RV probably costs over $1,000 a week.
Okay.
So we said we're going to have to buy one, but it needs to be used so it's not too expensive. But it has to be small enough so we can park it different places. But it has to be in good enough condition that it works. So we found a used RV. Finding a small one is very difficult. Small RV. We found a 1999 small RV in New Hampshire on Craigslist.
Okay.
And we decided to buy it outright. I think it was about $10,000. And so 2 members of my staff, I think, drove out there with a cashier's check, and we test drove it around.
Felt good.
Felt good. I think we bought it. They had to drive back and get the plates for it, and then drive back again to New Hampshire to put the plates on because they weren't going to give us. The car was too old to get the plates from the state DMV. The whole thing was very complicated.
So who was responsible for actually driving in the? Were you the man behind the wheel?
I drove sometimes. Will Burns was my political director, a young guy from Rhinebeck. He drove it around a lot. Rachel Scheinman was our communications director.
Was that a qualification for the campaign? You had to have a valid driver's license and be prepared to sit behind the RV?
Some members of my staff refused to drive the RV, and I did not blame them.
Wow.
This is a big vehicle.
Yes.
It was not easy to drive, but those who did, Rachel and Will and others, I really commended them for taking on that challenge.
And so how many people are staying overnight in Otsego in the RV? Is there like 3 people in it? 4 people? 2 people?
Between, I've slept in there by myself. Between 1 and 3, I would say, normally. You could fit 3 people in there. But it came to really symbolize our campaign. People would see me.
That's what I'll remember from the campaign.
I was getting signatures in Chatham one afternoon, and I was walking down the village of Chatham, and someone yelled to me, "Oh, you're the guy with the RV, right?" And it became really a way to define my candidacy. People weren't really sure who was who, but they knew I was the RV guy.
It's too bad that you couldn't be on the ballot. Just the RV candidate.
Yes, exactly. Gareth RV Rhodes.
Yeah.
But this is, and when the New York Times endorsed us, this was something they put front and center of one of the reasons they got behind us. There was a lot of, it helped really define a narrative that people said, if we want to win this race, it's important to have a candidate who can not just win in Ulster and Dutchess. We need to have somebody who can win in these rural areas. And what Gareth is doing is showing up in these areas. That's what, to me, we've met voters who disagreed with us on every single issue, but still supported us because we showed up.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times we go to these little towns and they would say, "We haven't even seen our member of the assembly. We haven't seen a member of the state senate. And you're running on the federal level, and here you are in a town of 800 people."
Mm-hmm.
And people were just stunned. And to me, it was so inspiring because this is what I wanted this campaign to be about. It was, yes, it's about winning the race, but also about hopefully trying to restore some faith and trust in the political process.
And where is the RV now?
So after the primary, I did a rally out in Dutchess County in support of one of the Karen Smythe who's running for state senate out there. And 2 activists came up to me and approached me. We lived out in Millerton, approached me and said they want to buy it. I was going to auction it off, actually. And they made a good offer on it. And I said, sure. They wanted to keep it, used in local political races. So
you mentioned the New York Times endorsement, and I think that was a real big moment in the race. And I'm assuming, based on where you worked, your liberal pedigree, that's got to be a big deal getting the New York Times endorsement. So I guess for starters, what went into that? What was that editorial board meeting like?
Sure.
If you had one, what was that whole process like?
So I think they probably called us in early June. We got the editorial board reached out, said we'd like to invite you down or talk to you on the phone. We're considering all the candidates in this race. So we arranged a time. I think it was like a Wednesday around. At some point, went down and met with the editorial board, and
that's gotta be stressful.
It was. I didn't know what to expect. This is not something I had actually sat in an editorial board meeting with the governor.
Okay.
When I worked for him, and he gave a PowerPoint. Kind of went through his.
The governor gave a PowerPoint. I can't believe it.
Exactly right. I'm sure you've seen that at the TU Ed board. So I'd seen the inside of it. I'd done a number of these. These editorial board meetings are tough.
Yeah.
I've seen it from the Buffalo News, the Daily News, New York Times. Just hours of just very tough questions. So I went in there and we immediately started diving into the issues, and we're talking about I made a big issue about the lack of maternity awards in this district. Something I kept hearing all over the place. 3 counties don't have a single maternity award in New York 19. And so there was the crisis facing a lot of the dairy farmers with the price of milk being so low. So we were probably for an hour, just were talking, kind of dove straight into the issues. And then an hour in, one of the members said, Gareth, normally when a candidate comes here, we ask them to introduce themselves and kind of talk about why they're running, and we realized we never gave you that chance. And I think it was then that I said, this is how it should be. We're really we're focusing on the issues more than just the politics of the race. So, but I left probably 2-hour long meeting, and
did you feel like it went well?
I thought it went fine, but these were other candidates in this race were, very well, there's other pretty sharp candidates as well. I said, we would be obviously very lucky to get this, but hopefully, if they're not going to support me, they just, don't support anyone. So it was I think it was a Sunday week and a little more than a week before the primary. I was doing an event in Rosendale. There was no cell phone service. It was a little barbecue. And we did the event. It was great. I was driving home, and the moment I hit cell phone service, my phone, I had 2 phones because I had one Verizon and one Sprint to try to map out coverage, and my phone just started, just nonstop texting, and I was sure there was some sort of crisis. Is this something, either somebody dropped out of the race or something happened.
Then covered your sex scandal, whatever.
Yeah,
exactly. It could be anything.
Exactly. Stormy Daniels has come out. Anyway, so I was freaking out a little bit, and so I called Alexa, my girlfriend, who was had just finished school, and she was in the district, and she said, "The New York Times endorsed you," and I couldn't believe it. I mean, I thought she was joking. I didn't really think we were going to get it. And then we read it, and it wasn't just a good endorsement for me. It kind of went through every candidate, assessed their strengths and weaknesses. It was a very well-reasoned editorial, and we were very, very excited. I know our team was, for the staff, for our supporters. I think a lot of people had seen us out around the district and says, your candidacy really makes sense. Your background, your roots here, your approach, and having that stamp of approval, I think really helped.
And when that came out, it seems like it was at a time in the race where you were building a lot of momentum. There were a lot of endorsements coming out. I think it had been a really crowded race. People didn't know what was going on. You were definitely considered in the top tier of the candidates. But at that point, I remember talking to Democratic operatives who were like, he could be the candidate to be. I mean, what was your feeling in the wake of all that and all these endorsements that you were racking up?
So we felt the biggest disparity kind of between was the fundraising. Antonio, I think, had raised more than $2 million. It was just every filing was just putting up hundreds of thousands of dollars. Very impressive. So people were often saying to us, we like you as a candidate. To me, we like you, Gareth. We like you as a candidate, but how are you going to beat this amount of money coming in? Pat Ryan's raising a lot of money. Brian Flynn had put in $1 million of his own dollars. And I said, well, we're going out there. We're meeting a lot of people every day. We're out in that RV talking to people, and now they're starting to endorse me. And look at the amount of local news coverage we're getting. This is what money can't buy. Is New York Times had covered the race earlier with just a news story and had kind of focused on us. And you saw this across the district. Every event we were doing, we were getting local coverage. And I was saying, we're getting coverage that you cannot pay for. But I think people were just not sure that without that kind of financial resources that we could, really be in that top tier. And I think when the New York Times came out, I got a lot of calls even from people who had given a lot of money to my opponents who said, we thought you were the right candidate, but we were nervous that you didn't have money, but now we're going to go all in for you because we want you to win this thing. So it was. I think it was for a lot of people kind of looking for a direction. It was helpful.
What role, if any, did the governor play in this? Did you consult with him about running? Did you talk with him for advice during the campaign? I think during one of the debates you did say you supported the governor, right? Okay, so I had my flipped around.
At the beginning when I first launched, there was this people said, well, Cuomo is putting up someone to run against Faso because they had this feud going back and forth, which was not true. I called Melissa. I called the governor's office and said, I am considering running for this seat. And they said, what? Really? I mean, that's cool. I mean, that was.
Who is this?
I've been gone for 2.5 years. I don't think they had expected me to call and say that's what my next thing was going to be. But they were very supportive. People said, we FASO has been taking votes against this state. We want to see him gone. We think you're a good candidate for this race. Let us know how we can help. So many of my former colleagues, some came to my events, were definitely supportive. But the governor had came down to Kingston and done an event. He had done a couple of events in the area where I'd seen him, and he'd always just kind of said to me, "How's it going? How's the race going? Looks like you're doing well out there. Let me know, if I can, of course, be of help, but we want to make sure we win this seat back for the Democrats. So, and we like, the way you're running the race. But it was beyond, just as friends and former colleagues. There was not, any kind of that type of involvement. So it was certainly helpful to have that background. And then they asked us. Alan Shartock had done a debate on WAMC.
Right.
And for all 7 of us, and they asked, who do you support in the upcoming primary? And I was, I think, the last candidate to answer. Everyone said, exactly. And I said, primaries are good for the Democratic Party. I've always believed that. But the reality is, I never met Cynthia Nixon. And I said, maybe, she should spend some more time upstate, which might be, it's good if you're running statewide to travel upstate. But I support the governor because of what he did during her. I know him. I've worked with him. I've seen how effective he is. And I've also seen what he did in this area after Hurricane Irene. When you lose everything, which a lot of farmers and small businesses did, and have a governor who was so active at helping rebuild, what he did with the beverage industry in the area. And Cynthia Nixon at that time was, maybe she still is, was against the property tax cap. This is some of the upstate New York, as you know, property tax is such a big issue. And being against that accomplishment, to me, would have really hurt her in the general election. Not to mention it not being good policy. So I had, voiced my support for the governor. My opponents kept saying, Gareth, because he supports the governor, is going to hurt him. I always said, people know me. People know that I'm independent. They've had the chance to ask me. I'm proud of my state government experience. I have disagreements. I've had disagreements with the governor. I'm running as my own person, and I'm proud that I was the only person in that race who had worked in state government and had some sort of government background here.
When does it dawn upon you that it's not my year?
So I think in the last week, one of the candidates who actually finished last got a poll saying that I was in last place, and then I think that candidate mentioned that they were in second or third place. And our volunteers made about 3,000 calls a night into the district. We made just nonstop phone calls, and we saw I was doing very well in what I'm going to call the outer counties. Ulster and Dutchess are the biggest counties here, but we saw we were doing very well outside of that. And I knew that if we could do well, if we could outperform Antonio in Ulster or come close, and then win some of those counties outside of Ulster and Dutchess, that we would win the primary.
Because you had a strong showing throughout the entire district.
Yes.
I mean, you might not have been first, but you were never last in any county. It seemed like you were always at least second or third everywhere.
We won Columbia, Sullivan, Delaware. We did very well. We came in third in Dutchess County, so we did very well in those counties, which we spent a lot of time in those areas.
So it sounds like you thought you had a path to victory. Then still, it was.
We absolutely did. What I saw at the end was this one candidate, David Clegg, who was a deacon in Kingston, had a very strong following in Ulster County because he lived there for 40 years, but had no following elsewhere.
Right.
Had no campaign presence, had no support. So I was, and I think other campaigns saw this as well, was he was going to take up a lot of Ulster votes, which if I could have put them together, we could have hopefully had a bigger base in Ulster, and then put it together with our other counties we won. We would have won. So I made an effort in that last week to really make the case that David is not going to win this race no matter what. He just doesn't have the support. If you want to vote, a lot of people were supporting Clegg. I was their number 2 choice. Mm-hmm. So I said, if you want one of us, only one of us has a chance of winning this race.
Gotcha.
So I tried to make that argument. It was hard. I mean, it's a politically nuanced argument, and hard to tell people to vote against someone they've known for many years.
Right.
Even if they think they're not going to win. So we tried very hard, and then when election night came, we thought we knew we were going to need a little bit of some help from above to get through, but we felt good. And I had sent staffers to all the major polling locations in the district, Rhinebeck, Hudson, and the first return I got back was from Ward 1 in Kingston. It was a very top, high-performing ward, and that I'd been endorsed by the alderman there, and I saw Antonio had just crushed it.
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, if he's doing so well in Kingston, it's gonna be hard for me to really do great in Ulster if he's doing so well in Kingston. And I saw Clegg doing very well in Kingston too, and I said, this is going to be tough. But then, the results came out from Rhinebeck. We had come in second. That's Antonio's hometown, very close second. Hudson, we were outperforming everyone. It wasn't even close. So I knew we were going to at least finish in the top three. And as the results came in, we did better and better and better. And then, 99% had reported. We were down, I think, by 1,000 votes then. And I knew there were 4,000 absentees out there. And I said, we can maybe come back from about half that margin with 4,000, but it's going to be tough. So I called, and this is probably around 11:30. I had huddled my advisors. Some said you should wait. Some said you got to call it. But to me, I knew we couldn't catch him. And to me, the party unity was so important. I didn't want to drag this out. So actually, Pat Ryan called me.
To say what?
Pat had a few less votes than I did. He had just called me to say, what are you thinking? What are you thinking of doing? He agreed with me that neither of us had a shot.
Right.
So I called Antonio, and we had a good conversation, and I congratulated him on a well-run race and said, let me know how I can help. So 2 days later, I did a rally with him to get my supporters, on his side.
You mentioned Clegg, and this was a 7-person race,
yes.
Right? I mean, was there an effort on your part to see, can we try to get people to drop out? Can we consolidate? I remember in 2008, when there was a Capital Region primary for Mike McNulty's seat, big race, eventually got winnowed down. People were dropping out, get endorsements. Same thing sort of happened in the 21st Congressional District to the north this go-around. Was that an effort of yours?
So not as much as it probably should have been, but it's hard to convince someone
right.
In a crowded race where you only need 8,000 votes that they don't have a path. And the Clegg people were convinced that they had 7,000 votes. I mean, he ended up, I think, less than half of that.
Mm-hmm.
So and if you've been out there for months, putting your own money into the race, blood, sweat, and tears, and it's a week to go, you're going to hold on to that belief that something might happen. And
right.
So it would have been very difficult to make that argument. There just wasn't. I think every reporter who covered the last week said this could go either way. I mean, the polling there was no public polls in this race. The campaigns were doing their own polling, which was wildly, wildly off, as you can imagine. Brian Flynn had done a poll, which he had sent to some people that said, don't vote for Gareth because he doesn't have a shot. Vote for me if you want to. If you think like me and myself and Gareth, vote for me because Gareth doesn't have a shot. I knew that wasn't true to start out with. I saw that we were much stronger than Brian, and we were. We won. We did much better than he did. So there was a lot of misinformation out there, and
right.
People didn't really know which way to.
So yeah, if you think you're going to win, even though you might really be in 7th, you're not going to drop out.
Exactly. Erin Collier had released that poll in the last week that showed her in 3rd place. I mean, I think, got came in 7th place. So it is
only 4 off.
Yeah. So I think it would have been hard to convince people to drop out of the race.
So after the race, you mentioned you had the Unity rally. How hard is that to turn on a dime and go from Gareth Rhodes, I'm the guy who's going to save all this, to Antonio Delgado, he's the guy. I mean, what's that like?
I think had it been, there was very little negative campaigning in this race. Beals was probably the most negative out there, but he wasn't even that negative. And we had run a very positive race, so we had not done any negative advertising against any of the candidates. So it had been very collegial to start out with. I'd probably spoken to Antonio on the phone dozens of times, texted with him. We've had dinner a couple of times. So I actually considered him and his wife Lacey friends. So it wasn't really that hard getting behind him at the end. And I slept for about 2 days, so it was nice to kind of take a break. But obviously, it was disappointing. It's hard to. We did it for over a year. It's hard to put yourself out there and then lose. But it was also I believe that beating FASA was the most important thing here, and so I thought the unity was very important.
So I guess the last question is, what are you doing now, and what are you running for next?
Well, my focus is on these November elections.
Okay.
We have to win the congressional race, and then there's state senate races in this area. There's, I think, 6 state senate races in the New York 9 that overlap with New York 19 that I've been very involved in. I just did an event last night for the Ulster County Sheriff primary. So I've been very involved in helping Democrats locally win their races. And I want to, I'll be staying involved with the local politics. I'm actually working right now on an effort to help galvanize the youth vote. Last midterm election, 40 million young people of voting age did not vote. So I've been working with a team of artists and performers to try to engage some of the most high-profile congressional races to help turn out the youth vote.
And is that a post-election beard you've got going, or is that
This is my get out the vote beard.
That's your get out the vote beard, not your Al Gore post-2000 beard?
No, I just took a little vacation with Alexa, who just took the bar. So I grew out a little beard on the trip and I said, hey, might as well keep it going for a little longer. Winter is coming.
And your hair looks great too. So I mean, that best head of hair in that whole race. So there was some good competitors.
I was just trying to copy your former colleague Matt Hamilton, with that that beautiful swoop.
Yeah, although I mean, he had it really cut trimmed on the sides. I like that you've
high
got
and tight.
Yeah, you've got some hair on the sides. That is a classic politician look. I think it looks pretty sharp.
I'm trying. I'll take off the toupee after the interview.
All right, well, that's where we always leave our interviews. So, Gareth, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Dave. Really appreciate it. Good to chat.
And that's our show. My thanks to Gareth Rhodes for joining me and opening up about his recent congressional campaign. To the listener, I am going back to the drawing board on the recording of the shows to make sure the audio quality matches the quality of our guest interviews. Thank you for your patience as the show continues to evolve. But if you enjoyed the podcast, despite any audio complications, please leave us a review or share your thoughts on social media. Until next time, podcast adjourned. My voice really is popping on this bad boy.